Hey everyone, welcome back. Today, I'm diving into Panenka, a book that packs a powerful punch despite its quiet, understated nature. If you're a fan of deeply emotional, character-driven stories, this one is a must-read. But don't expect a typical sports novel. This is more of a searing, delicate exploration of redemption, shame, and second chances. In Panenka, we follow the life of a man who has fallen from grace, struggling to rebuild his life after a public scandal in his football career. It's a book that will have you reflecting long after you've finished reading, making you question the impact of one mistake and how we move forward from it. Stick around as I break down the beautiful, devastating writing, the rich characters, and why this small book feels like a work of art. This book is a searing, moving character study, yet it remains so beautifully understated. It doesn't overwhelm you with drama, but rather, it quietly wraps you in its poignant narrative, where every word feels like it holds weight. The story's peripheral characters are just as well crafted as the protagonist, each one playing a pivotal role in creating a rich, textured world. And as we've established, this is the kind of book that will make you want to sob an ugly, cathartic cry because it's so quietly sad, so somber. It's devastating, yet strangely comforting in its quietness. The writing in this tiny book is an emotional punch that hits hard, a devastating tragedy wrapped in restraint. At its core, the novel is a domestic tragedy. It's the story of a family broken apart by a public shaming, a devastating consequence of a bad decision in the protagonist's football career. But it's also a story of redemption, of rebuilding oneself after falling from grace. The main character is on a journey to piece his life back together, to give himself a second chance at happiness, despite the weight of his past constantly pulling at him. What I love most about this book are its observations on life and human nature. Rónán Hession is a master at capturing the complexities of real people, the kind of messy, flawed humans we all are. He has this unique ability to articulate universal truths, those little things we all experience, but often can't quite put into words. His prose is compact yet eloquent, simple but profound. It's a rare talent to say so much with so little. It's only fitting that the book has a painting on the cover because it's truly a work of art. The narrative feels like a painting itself, lyrical, self-assured, and astute. It lingers in your mind long after you've finished reading. There's an exquisite, almost quiet beauty in the way it captures life's fragility and the human desire to start anew. I couldn't put it down. The way it made me feel, the way it left me reflecting long after the last page, is something I won't forget. Panenka, his name was Joseph, but for years they had called him Panenka, a name that was his sadness and his story. These past months, the pressure pain in his head had been coming almost every night, building like an Atlantic wave that roiled within his dreams until it broke and crashed through his sleep, shocking him awake. It manifested as a clamp on his face. Working at bone level, it would spread from the crease between his eyebrows, around the orbits of his pounding eyes and onwards to his jaw, which would stiffen and lock with tension. He called it his iron mask. With the palms of his hands pressed against his cheeks, he would run to the bathroom to compress his face against the cool, hard side of the bath, barely relieving the nerves that had made signals pulsing through them. Pulling the duvet up as far as his cheek, which bore no bruises or scars, no evidence of the silent violence, he would catch a bubble of thought passing through his mind. Was this time worse or the same as the last? Was the pain spreading or different? But he had learned to ignore these questions. The iron mask was unknowable in any real sense and beyond any bargaining. As Panenka lay there on his side, on one of those shipwrecked mornings he had become so used to, His grandson, Arthur, pushed open the bedroom door and climbed into the bed. His weight was not substantial enough to roll Panenka out of the hollow on his side of the mattress, so the child was able to settle himself back into a familiar arrangement based on body heat. He had often cited his grandfather's indulgence of these visits as a defense against his mother's objections to them living in a house of adults will sharpen any 7-year-old's advocacy skills to a precocious level. On finding her son's bed vacant and ruffled, Marie Therese called into Panenka's room without looking. "Arthur, 5 more minutes. I'm bored," said Arthur to the ceiling once his mother had gone downstairs and out of range. He turned to Panenka and woke him with a nudge to the kidneys. "Pop, can I wear a tracksuit today?" "Morning, my friend," replied Panenka without opening his eyes or moving. "Everyone's wearing tracksuits. It makes no sense to force kids to wear uniforms with ties. It's the wrong type of clothes. Tracksuits are Tuesday and Thursday, but you don't get into trouble if you wear them other days." Arthur leaned up on his elbow and turned Panenka's chin towards him. "Not getting into trouble is not the same as being good," said Panenka. "Do I have to wear a tie? Then no tie. I agree with you there. I can't think of a single reason for you to wear a tie. It hardly makes sense for adults to wear them." "Mama," roared Arthur. "I'm not wearing a tie. Pop says I'm allowed." "Stop shouting," called Marie Therese from downstairs, amid the sounds of spoons and bowls. "If you want to talk to me, come into the same room that I'm in." "Hit the snooze," said Arthur. Panenka pressed the top of his grandson's head and they lay there for a few more minutes, Arthur falling back into the carefree rest of a child and Panenka sobering himself after the intensity of the past night. He pulled the uniform from the wardrobe in Arthur's room and threw the elastic tie back onto the shelf. Laying the clothes out on the bed, he closed all but the top 2 buttons of the school shirt, leaving those as practice for Arthur to dress himself, each successful effort getting a star on the chore chart. Panenka gave Arthur a piggyback downstairs to the kitchen, where Marie Therese was wearing the androgynous trouser suit she had just ironed. The name badge on her lapel had limited space and said trainee manager, Marie. She had recently taken a promotion at the supermarket where she had worked for several years, going from cashier to a management role that she had been encouraged to apply for. It was a little bit more money, but she lost shift allowances, overtime, and the friendship of the women she had worked with on the registers, and so far she was struggling to assert herself with the men in the stockroom. There was something subtly undermining in their frigid cooperation, and she could sense their hostility like a draft on her shoulders whenever she swept through to look in on them. But she contained her anxiety, and instead projected managerial competence through her perfectionism. She had been taught that retail is detail and was meticulous in her standards, despite knowing that this was a sure way to get called a bitch behind her back. As she sometimes reminded herself, this was all part of getting ahead and taking her life back, even if the small patch of alopecia behind her left ear had begun to worry her. It was easy to hide it now, but if it became any bigger it would surely expose her lack of confidence, or worse, earn her a nickname. "Here you go, Arthur. Make sure you don't get it on your uniform," she said, handing him a bowl of porridge with honey in it. "We'll have to go to school early today. I'm due in for the delivery shift." "Don't worry about that," said Panenka. "I have a later start today, so I can drop him off at the gates before I go. He's still waking up, I think." Arthur was sitting on a beanbag, staring at cartoons, his bowl balanced on his soft belly as he slouched. His hand rested on the remote, having nudged up the volume to drown out the adults' chatter behind him. "How are you this morning?" she asked, kissing her father on the top of his head. I heard you up and about last night. Everything okay? It's those migraines. I'll get it seen too. I feel normal now, like it never happened. Have you had breakfast? I've a banana in my bag. I'd better run. I need to get in before the delivery is done. I have to check everything off. Can't you get someone else to do it, one of the lads? I could, but if there's a mistake it comes out of my pocket. See you later. Marie-Thérèse stooped down to kiss Arthur, who was engrossed in the screen. Be good for a pop now, won't you, buddy? She said. As she pulled away he caught the back of her neck and hooked her in for a kiss of his own. Arthur preferred dry kisses, wet ones got wiped off with his sleeve. Panenka sat over his coffee and porridge, half watching the cartoons himself. His cheeks and forehead were clear, no lingering sensations. He had described it as a face migraine to his doctor, who had known him for years, ever since his footballing days had ended. He and the doctor were about the same age, and Panenka was not the first man he had examined who had downplayed his health worries. As their families had grown up, they had often chatted informally during routine checkups, enjoying the type of jokes that men share in private. The doctor was concerned about the headaches but would say little about the condition except that migraines shouldn't feel like iron masks and that Panenka would need a scan. He could wait 9 months, or else go private, if he could afford it. Panenka had said that there was no big rush and that he didn't mind waiting, embarrassed about declaring his financial situation to an old friend. I'll tell you what, the doctor said. There's a Dr. Wolf who's doing a series of short residencies at the hospital. He's a consultant neurosurgeon from Portugal who's an expert in middle-aged men with headaches who follow underachieving football teams. So maybe I can see about getting you a session with him. It's a teaching residency, which means there'll be a registrar there, a trainee surgeon who's learning from him. Would that be a problem? Is that private or public? Neither. It's sort of off books. It's a teaching consultation, so there's no cost, provided you're comfortable with being part of the training process. To be honest, I'm only telling you about this because we've known each other a long time and I think it's worth getting this checked out soon. I don't want to worry you, but I think you need to be examined by someone experienced. It might be nothing, but a nothing from Dr. Wolf is worth more than a nothing from me. Deal? He asked. Why not? He had been booked for a preliminary scan the following week, getting an afternoon of work to go on his own. It was all over in time for him to be home for dinner with Marie-Thérèse and Arthur at the usual hour. He had said nothing to them about the scan or the panic attack that he had when he was in the MRI scanner, nor about the long chat with the young radiographer about changing his mind, or the submissive resignation when he was delivered into the machine for a second time, feeling utterly powerless and alone. He had expected that they would print off the scan pictures like at a passport booth, and tell him the news one way or the other. But the pictures had to be referred to Dr. Wolf and Dr. Nunes, whoever he was, or, as it turned out, whoever she was. It had taken 4 weeks for Dr. Wolf's office to call Panenka for that morning's appointment. Panenka shaped the last few lumps of porridge into a spoonful and finished it. Time's up, Arthur. Brush your teeth before it's too late. We're going in 300 seconds. That's 5 minutes, said Arthur without shifting. He was used to his grandfather's sly way of pushing arithmetic on him. They walked through the part of town Panenka had lived in for many years, an area known as the Crucible, where a mix of strays, seasonal workers, and outsider communities lived. People dependent on the local authorities, mostly. Over the years, much of the area had been scheduled for demolition, or urban regeneration as it was called, but there was always a new population of unwanted people who needed to be housed somewhere. anywhere, and the crucible served a useful purpose as far as the town was concerned. It was a sort of spare room where all the problems were dumped with a view to sorting them out later, or forgetting about them altogether. It was where the pavements crumbled, where blown street lamps went the longest without being fixed, where people used sheets as curtains, where grown men lived for two a room in bunk beds. For all its flaws, it was cheap and within walking distance of most places. Panenka had always liked the invisibility of living in the crucible, it being full of people from elsewhere who were too busy with their own precarious lives to notice him. They walked up to the school with Panenka shouldering Arthur's bag, which was heavier than he had expected. In it was a Tupperware box packed with the school bismuth, a futuristic silver grey block from the science table that Arthur had been entrusted with over the weekend as a reward for coming second in a quiz. It had never left his bag. "Pop, what's plastic surgery?" asked Arthur, kicking a flattened Coke can into the road while they waited at a pedestrian crossing. "It's when people get an operation on their skin to make them look younger. It flattens out their wrinkles." "Oh. Why? What did you think it was?" "I don't know. I thought it was like pretend surgery." "Come on, it's a green man. Mama says that some people are addicted to plastic surgery." "Let's not talk crossing the road, my friend. Wait until we get to the other side. Remember, both ways, I'm doing it. Don't be a lighthouse, moving your head from side to side. Pay attention." At the other curb they joined the shoal of children holding hands with grown-ups, all going in the same direction. "Do footballers get plastic surgery?" "Not when I played. These days they look like pop stars, so maybe that's changed. I was more worried about surgery on my knees or my ankles." "Did you ever have an operation?" "A few times, unfortunately." "What was the worst one?" "Once I broke my leg and then they had to break it again because it didn't set properly." "That's disgusting." Arthur grabbed his bag when they reached the school gates and bolted to join a group of boys who were huddled and talking excitedly like Wall Street traders. He had quietly explained to Panenka a few weeks before that goodbye kisses were acceptable at home, but not in public. Even hugs and high fives were being suspended pending a full review. Arthur was comparing heights with a boy that Panenka had seen before at one of the birthday parties. Arthur looked cleaner and newer standing next to him, with hair that was styled and not just short. His shoes didn't have broken laces. His jumper was fitted without looking too small. The other boy looked a little unfinished beside him, not that either of them noticed or cared. It all came from Marie Therese and her unappreciated attention to the little things. She kept it all in her head, all on top of her new job and 1,001 other things a 28-year-old mother was supposed to fit into her life. The school bell rang and the children ran screaming into their lines as the parents broke off their small talk and dispersed back to their cars. Mostly mothers, a few dads and, least hassled of all, the grandparents, helping out. At 50, Panenka was a young grandfather and was good at it, that is to say, interested in it. There was a playful inversion involved in the grandfather-grandson relationship. It was child-led. Arthur chose the agenda and set the pace for their conversations, which always led back to him answering his own questions in his own way. He had such an innocent certainty, as though he were not so much figuring things out as recalling lost knowledge from a previous existence. Working methodically, he used yes/no questions to deconstruct the world's inconsistencies and injustices. In all this, Panenka was the sidekick, the who's there, in the knock-knock joke, as well as the clown, the tickler, the absurdist, the dumb bunny that Arthur explained things to. Nobody ever goes to counseling about their difficult grandparents. It is love without the stakes, If only Panenka's other relationships had been like that. Perhaps they could have been, but it was too late for that thought. It was needed years ago, when he was failing as a father, a husband, a friend, and as a human. Too much of his life had involved making mistakes that carved deep grooves into the lives of those around him. Who was he to be wise now? He had always guessed that his bad choices would have to be accounted for eventually and that there would be a reckoning. So that was how he saw things, and that was how he saw the abjection of the night and the bathroom floor. That's all for today's exploration of Panenka by Rónán Hession. This novel is an absolute gem, a quiet yet profound character study that speaks to the humanity in all of us. Its understated approach makes the story hit even harder, reminding us of the resilience and second chances we often seek in our own lives. If you've ever felt the weight of past mistakes or longed for redemption, this book will resonate deeply with you. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Does Panenka's journey remind you of anyone, or maybe even yourself? Drop your reflections in the comments, and let's talk about it. And if you're looking for more moving, thought-provoking reads, stick around. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on the next discussion. Until then, take care, and happy reading.